Welcome everyone to this episode of the Palmetto Guardian. I'm Sergeant Chelsea Baker.
And I'm Sergeant Tim Andrews.
And it has definitely been a while since we've done one of these.
Yeah.
Welcome to our new studio. We apologize in advance. It's been a couple weeks since we've done a podcast. We were in the process of moving. You could probably tell our setup is a little different. So we were in the museum. We are now in the Bluff Road Armory. And so just bear with us. We might tweak the setup a little bit, but we're pretty set right now for what we have. But we're excited to finally get some more content out to everybody. And we have a familiar face in the studio with us again.
I'm back.
So I'll let you introduce yourself again for everybody who maybe who hasn't seen you on the podcast. And if you haven't, you need to check out all the other podcasts that you've been on, because you've been on several with us and you've discussed a lot of good topics. So I'll let you introduce yourself to those who maybe haven't seen you on the other podcasts that you've done.
Well, thanks again for having me, you guys. My name is Lisa Mustard. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist here in the great state of South Carolina. And I've had the honor and privilege of working for the Guard for many years. And yeah, so we've done a bunch of podcasts. And in fact, I think you guys created a playlist that you call Behavioral Health. So you can just click on that playlist and get caught up with all the good stuff that we've shared. So I'm excited to be back and now honored that I'm the first one in your new studio. Yeah, this is I love the new space, and I love that you're just across the hall from me. So we could do even more stuff. We could do more topics. And that's what I want to encourage people. I really would love it if the listeners or the viewers had topics that they want us to cover. I am more than open to talking about whatever is going on in the emotional life of our soldiers and their family members, as well as the behavioral health life, because you can't have one without the other. I'm convinced emotions can lead to behaviors, which, well, we could get into all that. But I'm excited to be here and talk about one of the things that gets requested most. And I can't believe we haven't done a podcast on this yet, which is communication skills or communication issues. So
yes. And it kind of goes with our job as well, because with public affairs, we have to communicate to the public and to the National Guard and soldiers and airmen. So I'm glad that we are discussing this topic, because that is a big part of our job as well. So I'm excited.
Yeah. What I guess we could look at this in a number of different ways, because there's the communication skills of like professional communication, being at work, being in a drill status, having to communicate with authority or your supervisor or your commander. There's definitely that. And I think there's usually some protocols that within the military system or structure that we go by for sure. I've witnessed wonderful communication from leadership, and I've witnessed communication that I'm in the background going, like it's like nails on a chalkboard, but I know that they're doing the best they can with the skills that they have. So that's a whole other probably topic, but it's one that's just as important, because I think no matter what, the number one thing that we get requested for when it comes to families or couples is, I think we just need some communication skills. We're not jiving. We're not we're not on the same page. We're having a hard time with talking to our kids. And that is kind of like what a lot of the issues can boil down to. Behind communication issues or communication skills is usually there's something going on in the family or in the marriage that people are butting heads on, or they feel like it's just kind of like the elephant in the room, and they just have a hard time getting on the same page or having a productive conversation, because a lot of the times our emotions get triggered, and so I just want to encourage people to, if you're listening and watching to this, just have an open mind and an open heart to maybe picking up on something that you didn't know before, or you weren't sure how to move forward with it. And I want to start out with a quote that I actually shared on social media the other day, because I think it's really important. It's one by Viktor Frankl, who is he was a psychologist who survived the Holocaust, and he wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. Have you guys heard of that book?
I've heard of it.
Okay. A couple years ago, John Denny and I did a book study. Well, John really did it. I was just tagging along. But John Denny did a book study on that book with folks here in the TAG complex, and it was such a wonderful group, and we talked a lot about what is man's search for meaning. And the quote that really stuck out for me, and one of the more famous quotes from the book, is, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." It's pretty powerful, I think, when you really kind of chew on that for a little bit, because stimulus, something happens, Something happens in front of you, it enters your world. There's a stimulus. You may or may not have a response to what just occurred, but between that stimulus and your response, there's like a lag time. Well, a lot of people get triggered pretty quick, and there may not be a whole lot of lag time. But in between that stimulus and your response, you have the power to choose how you will respond and how you will react. And that is where growth and freedom lies. And I think it's a really amazing quote for us to remember and to really think on as we deal with a lot of the things that are going on in our world right now. Stuff we don't agree with, stuff we do agree with. People see things from a different perspective, from a different cultural lens. People see things from behavior. You know, we all have a set of beliefs that we come into our jobs, our relationships, whatever. And when somebody we love and we care about, or we have to work with, or whatever differs, we have a responsibility as an adult to be totally in charge of how we respond and react. And I think that can be difficult. It can be difficult for me in a variety of things. You know, I can get emotional and reactive like that when it comes to certain things, but it's something that we can all kind of meditate on, and we can really think about how do we want to respond, because it's the only thing we can control is how we respond and react. We can't control another person. We can't control that at all, but we can only control ourselves and how we're going to show up and how we're going to communicate, I guess, moving forward. So I just kind of like threw that on you guys. What do you think about that?
It's definitely something like you don't learn off the bat. You observe. For me, observing others or people, just giving advice on how to respond to things. Mm-hmm. Great example is my oldest brother and I are very much so alike. So he's got a good 8 years on me, and he's like, hey, we talk a lot, we communicate a lot, and he and I are very much so alike, and he's like, hey, don't respond this way. Like I've already been there, and there's times I've taken his advice, I'm like, dang, that was on the spot right there. And then there's times I didn't take his advice, and I was like, oh, yeah, I could have handled that a whole lot better. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, if you take that and process it, we're like, yeah, probably should, like AAR, after action review of your response of whatever the situation was, like, I could have handled that better, or I did, that was better, and seek improvement on that.
Yeah, that's a great example. I really like it. I like how you trust your brother. You guys have similar beliefs and values, I guess, I'm mm-hmm. guessing. You love him, you feel safe with him, you connect with him, and so you take his advice, you take heed, like you learn from his experience. And I love that you have the awareness that if it didn't go the way you were hoping it would, you know, you kind of like AAR it. That's really smart. I like how that's a really great military way of looking at it. But you kind of like think about it. Okay, what did I do? How did I respond? What might I do different next time? How could I be more effective? Did I learn? What lessons did I learn? You know, and I think that's awesome. Good job. I mean, A+.
Oh, thanks.
I love it. I love it. What about you, Sergeant Baker?
As far as
just that whole idea of between a stimulus and a response, we have that choice of what we can control is how we respond.
I guess it just depends on the situation. Like mm-hmm. sometimes it's easy to, like whatever the topic is, to stop and be able to respond in a certain way. And then other times you just can't control your emotions because of whatever the topic is. So learning ways to be able to effectively communicate will allow that, because I know in certain situations, whether it's a friend or a family member or a coworker or an acquaintance, sometimes you just, in that moment, you don't know how to control yourself because you're just so upset and you don't know how to communicate in an effective way because you don't feel that they're getting right. the point that you're trying to explain, or they're not understanding what you're trying to convey to them. And so you just go down this rabbit hole of nothing, right. and you're not getting anywhere with them. And so learning how to be able to effectively communicate and stopping yourself, and like you said, knowing how you can control yourself and understanding that you can only control your reaction and not how they react is better than reacting in the same way that they're going to react, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's wise too, and I think you're spot on. There are where every day we have the experience of trying to get our point across and be heard and be validated and wanting to share in just, we're human beings. I mean, we connect. Like, that's what we're here for. That's part of human connection is part of what makes us human. And so wanting to connect and wanting to have conversations is important. And it's a struggle at times, depending on who it is, the context of the conversation, the history that you have with that person. There's a lot that goes into it. And I honestly believe that most people just want to be listened to. And so one of the best things that we can do as effective communicators is just learn to listen. And a lot of couples that I talk to or work with, that's part of the issue, is that they get so heated and they get so emotionally reactive that they don't hear what the other person is really asking for or what they're needing. And we're so quick to share on the other side, like, well, what about me? What about my feelings? Like, you don't hear what I just said. You just totally. So there's like, I understand that couples can go down that path. And it takes two people to effectively communicate, right? So if you're listening today or watching today and you're like, I just wish my husband would respond differently, or I wish my wife would respond differently, I want to challenge you to think about how you're showing up in that conversation, more so than what the other person is doing. How are you showing up? What are your listening skills like? What kind of questions are you asking? And are you already planning your response before they're done? Because half the time, that's usually where people get tripped up, is they don't feel heard, or they feel like you're just already planning your response, as I'm talking. Mm-hmm. And that's normal. I think that we do that, because we're like, oh, I know where this is going and we've been here before. And, so it's like, here we go again. But really, I challenge people to just do something different in the conversation instead of doing what you've always done. Because, like, the definition of insanity is what? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And I'm just as guilty of that as that with my husband. I get that. Like, you get so emotionally reactive and you're like, we've been down this road before. My history of blah, 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 blah. How dare you? And he's just like, yeah, So it's hard, and it takes personal responsibility, and it takes practice, and it takes patience. But imagine, and I'll even throw it in there too, like, your kids are seeing how you react and respond to each other. So you're setting that precedent for them. So, and if you see it showing up in your kids and they're like totally doing what you're doing, I mean, I have to be I'm responsible for that. And if I see something going on in my kids that I'm like, oh, I don't like that. I don't want them to perpetuate that. I have to go, well, hold on, Lisa, how are you showing up? How are you having conversations with them? Because they totally model and they pick up on everything that we do.
So it'll be like subconsciously, like later down the line, they're like, oh, I'm doing what my dad, or I'm acting like my dad, or in this way I'm acting like my mom, or stuff like that. Right. No, I totally agree.
Yeah. And it's not your fault.
Yeah.
It's not my fault. It's just, that's how it works. Kids model what they see growing up. And unfortunately, some kids are modeled not the healthiest of communication skills. So, this can go, we could go on and on about all that, but let's kind of dive into some practical things that we can do, or I'd like to share with couples or families when they come to us and they say, well, we're just not communicating. And a lot of it too is helping them have the conversation. So we do a lot of that as well. Like, well, can we have this conversation with you there to help us understand each other better? And that's probably one of my favorite things to do. Like, when I get asked to do that, I just love it, because that shows that they're open and they are willing. And a lot of the times it'll be one spouse wants one of us there to kind of, they say, like, mediate or referee. And I'm like, that's not really what I'm here for. I'm here to help you guys learn to talk to each other in a more healthy way. So let's focus on that. So we just kind of help them slow down the conversation, help them, you tell us what it is you need. Okay, so we heard you. And then how did you hear what he said? How did you interpret that? Or what did you hear? A lot of the times it's not even what he really said. It's, I heard that when I was a kid and my dad said this is how I feel. I'm like, but okay, that's not what he said. So there's all this baggage that we bring to our conversations, all these nuances, all this stuff that, like, we don't even realize we're putting it out there. So things that are important, I had to bring some notes, so I made sure I went over all of them, is make sure that you are in a safe space that you can have this conversation. Don't, request to have a conversation when it's like Carolina's or Clemson's first home game. That is not the day to have, especially if you love football, probably not the best day to have this meaningful conversation that you want to have. Be respectful of each other and know, like, okay, he is watching whatever right now, or she is, reading right now, or whatever it is. But just say, if you want to have a conversation, maybe set the appointment, like, hey, there's something I want to talk to you about. It's important. Can we talk about it, maybe after you're done, or tomorrow morning when the kids are sleeping? Set aside time that you're going to have this conversation. I think that's really important. And make sure that, you set the intention in your mind as to what you want to accomplish before you go into it. Try really hard to be relaxed, try really hard not to be already working yourself up into a tizzy of like thought cycles, or this is how it's gone in the past, so why do I even bother? Every time we say, how am I going to be different this time in the conversation? How am I going to say what I need to say in a healthy way? And how am I going to listen to what the response is? State your thoughts and your feelings as concisely as you can. Own them. Do not say, well, you blah blah blah, blah 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 blah, you. Instead, say I am, I feel, I think. Use I statements. Don't say, I feel that you. That's really not the best way. I feel hurt when I come home from work and I've had a really long, busy day and X, Y, and Z. And I see blah, blah, blah on the ground. Or there's laundry everywhere. The dishes haven't been done. Or, okay, well, I understand that, having a long day is having a long day. How can I help you with that? Versus, well, I had a long day too, and I can't believe you're blaming me for blah, blah, blah. Because eventually you'll get to that place of, well, I had a long day as well, and I can understand that. And so you're really opening the door for conversation and for problem solving, not so much blaming and complaining, I guess is what I'm trying to say. What do y'all think of that?
So taking ownership, and like you said, instead of you can only, like you said earlier, you can only control yourself, and all that. Yeah, I've definitely tried to stay away from the statement of I feel. Now the emotions do come to agree to a certain point to where you have to put them out, but I try to correct myself a lot instead of saying I feel, I think, and that way, because you can use if you use your emotions more than your thoughts and your thinking process, it's can take over and not be good.
Yeah, and it's think is a lot more sometimes logical than feel, because people can debate your feelings and they can debate your thoughts too, but we tend to get a little more emotionally reactive when people don't validate our feelings.
And it's hard to, like when you're emotionally invested a lot, it's hard to step back. I remember this one quote, it's minds are like parachutes, they only work when they're open.
Ooh, I like that.
Now, what would you say though if you're having that conversation with somebody and you're using those kind of you're using those kind of statements and stuff like that, and they're still not understanding what you're saying, they're still getting defensive, or they're still not listening to what you're saying? Where would you go from there? Would you maybe stop the conversation and say that we should continue this once we've cooled down? Or like how would you go about that if the other person still is not understanding what you're trying to convey to them?
Yeah, I think that's really a good idea. I mean, you can definitely say, I see you're getting really upset here by what I'm sharing with you. Would it be helpful if we just kind of cooled down for like 10 minutes? But I think the more calm that you can say it, and the more in control of your emotions and of what you're seeing, the better for you, the better for me. Like, it just goes to show whoever maybe you're having that conversation with is like, okay, yeah, fine. Like, let's just cool off and let them go and cool off. And then, you can 20 minutes, you can re-engage. Would now be a good time to kind of pick up where we left off? And then you could even open it up by saying, you know, what I heard was this. When I shared my thought on this, I saw, or I felt, or I think you were taken back by that, or it upset you. Can you tell me what upset you? You know, so you're inviting them to kind of explain a little bit more about what's going on internally. And that can be magic for a lot of people, because a lot of the times they don't get that validated. And that's a sign of a good listener too, because it's not really all about you. I mean, sure, you want to get your point across, but if they ideologically, is that a word? Ideologically, or you know what I'm trying to say? Like, if they don't have the same value, or they don't have the same belief, and that's okay. Like, that's what makes us wonderful, you know, and that's what makes us American. We can agree to disagree, which I think is that's a freedom, right? So if you can have that going back into the conversation, I'm not trying to convince you to agree with me. I'm just trying to get my point across, but I want to understand you as well. Then I think that goes so far. But so many people just give up. They have a fight. They walk away because they're scared. They're scared of what might be underneath all that. Because if I really get down to the root of this, I might have to admit to some things that I'm not ready to admit to. So that's a possibility, you know, they're just not ready. They may not be as emotionally available to that side of them because of childhood trauma, because of mental health issues that get in the way. They get triggered. They have anxiety. So there's a lot of stuff that might be going on underneath the surface that you may not know about. So we have to, like, personally, you know, I'm not here. I guess what it comes down to is a lot of people want to win. They want to win an argument. They want to be right. And I'm like, well, what's that all about? Like, what is it that you have to be right for, you know? And usually for that person, it's fear too. You know, they're scared as well. So a lot of things are at play here when it comes to communication. And I think that, like Viktor Frankl says, how we respond, how we choose to show up and respond is way more important than anything. And also, of course, how we listen to other people. I don't need to be right. Like, I know my values, I know my beliefs, I know my people that I surround myself with who are similar and yet also different, but we can communicate. We don't always agree, but who wants to agree with everything? Like, that doesn't make for interesting life, right? Or to, so I don't know if I answered your question. I feel like I kind of went off on a tangent, but it's ask more questions, listen harder, you know, especially in a relationship, a friend relationship. It's different here in work. It's different, you know, at drill. It's definitely different. But that's why, you know, you have the 800 number. If you're at drill and you're having a hard time and you feel like you're just stuck in a corner and you can't communicate effectively, or you don't agree with what's coming down, we'll call our 800 number and get the on-call therapist and have a conversation. We can help you with it. We can help you process what's going on. We can give you some feedback. Because a lot of our soldiers are very young. They come in, they have ideas about the world. They have ideas about what leadership should be or shouldn't be. And it's hard for a lot of them to, you know, navigate these new conversations with people in authority. So that's another thing that we're here for as well, you know,
So my other question that I have that kind of goes with that, I guess, is how do you set aside your, I guess in a sense, your baggage, like your past experiences, like you were saying, your anxiety, your childhood traumas, when you're having these conversations, and in the back of your head, like whether you're the person having the conversation or the person on the other end that's you're having the conversation with, and their reactions towards you, and how do you put that aside? Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm asking that right. Like,
you mean like if it's somebody you care about?
Yeah, like what, like how am I trying to ask it? Like your past relationships or past experiences with things that have happened to you when you were a child and stuff, and that's why you have problems with communication because of whatever that you've dealt with in the past, and that's why you have issues with communication, because you react in a certain way. Like, how do you overcome those things?
Oh yeah, that's a big question. That's
And then
a $1 million question.
and how do you react to, what's a healthy way to change your reaction to those
Right.
who have the same thing in return when you're trying to communicate with
Right.
them?
So I'm just going to start talking and you tell me if
Okay.
if we need to kind of back it up.
Okay.
So first and foremost, it's hard to be in a relationship with someone who has that going on and they don't see it. Mm-hmm. So as somebody who cares about them and loves them and wants the best for them, you may need to have that conversation. You know, I notice when we have this conversation about, I don't know, give me an example, like, the future of our relationship, like it's pretty heavy conversation, right? You respond this way and, you know, I'm worried about you, you know, and I'm wondering, can you tell me more about past relationships? Now I know, like, in the heat of the moment, that's not like the easiest thing to come to terms with. And even as a counselor, when I'm in the middle of it, like with a family or friend, it's not really my place to start like down the counseling road. But I would say something like, as a friend, I'm really worried about you because I noticed that when this topic comes up, you get really upset. Do you notice that too? So that's one way you can address it. It's hard to say that sometimes. Sometimes it's easier a lot of people just don't even want to go there. They're like, it's easier to just avoid it. Mm-hmm. But eventually that person will probably repeat that pattern in another relationship. And, you know, it's up to you if you want to. How much do you value that relationship, I guess is what it comes down to. So then the next question I would have is, as a counselor, as a therapist, it would be to that person, you know, if they decide, yeah, you know, I do have some issues with this, I would say, how is this getting in the way of your daily life? How does this get in the way of your functioning? I can't keep a job. I'm on my 5th boyfriend in 6 months. My kids, you know, so it starts to show up as a behavior in their lives, that it's like the common denominator in all of this is that person, and that person reacts, and it is getting in the way of daily life, or it's getting in the way of a relationship, and the person in the relationship with him or her is like, I can't do this anymore, you know. So you have to, what you're trying to do is help that person have the awareness that something is going on and that is really getting in the way of having a healthy relationship where both people are winning, in the sense of you're both getting something out of this relationship. That's hard. There's no one thing you can do or one thing you can say. And some people will be reactive and hate you for bringing it up, you know, not want to talk about it, not want to go there. Some people might say, wow, I never thought about that before. You're right. Like, I could use some support or some help. And we can't be responsible for how they respond and react. All we can do is bring light to it if we feel we need to. So that's the hard answer, because there's no, like, it would be great if there was like a flag you could wave and be like, hey, you know, now you're doing it. You're doing that thing again. Like, could you stop? It's uncomfortable for you. So once again, it brings up stuff in you of like, oh, here I am with this friend. It's a lot of energy to put into this relationship. It takes a lot out of me. I start to dread hanging out with him or her. You have to make the decision. Do you want to stay in friendship or relationship with that person? It's not easy being a human and connecting and having, you know, relationships, but it's worth it, you know. It's hard. Did that answer your question?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of. Okay. Do you have any other questions? Or is there anything else you want to?
No, I mean, I don't know if I kind of went off your list of, or your notes of things that you wanted to discuss.
Yeah, communication it can go in so many different directions. Mm-hmm. We're talking about the other person and trying to get your point across or be heard or be seen. And then we're also talking about when they don't see how their reactiveness and gets in the way of having a friendship. My guess is that if my thing is like, if you love and care about the person and you want what's best for them, then there's always a way to like try to have that conversation in a loving way, and I care about you way. And I mean, I've been in situations where the friend wants to bring a friend in and have a conversation because they're so worried about the emotional reactivity of the other person that they hope like the counselor can kind of help have a conversation about the relationship, because really that's what we do. We're not here to decide like, okay, Andrews, you're right today, and Baker, you're wrong, but next week, Baker, you got a point, and Andrews, you got a point. We are in favor of the relationship. You, her, together, the we. And that's what we're invested in. If that's what we want moving forward, is we want to be on a better page. We want to work together, but I've also had people who just want me to say, do you think that he or she is wrong? I'm like, I don't know. Like, it's not my role to say who's wrong. It's not my role to judge. It's not my role to pick sides. But a lot of couples will want that, So you have to be, couples counseling is one of the hardest things to do. It's rewarding and it's great, but it's difficult because you got two people with two different histories, a lot of different things in the closet, and they're trying to keep this relationship going, and their baggage is like button up against each other, or their history is button up against each other. And at the end of the day, they want to understand each other. They want to love each other. They want to move forward together. But you have to be willing to look at your stuff and maybe make some changes. And all we can be responsible for is what we do. We can't change the other person. And I think that a lot of times people want like, well, teach me some communication skills that I can change the other person. And I'm like, if that existed, I'd be a millionaire.
Yeah, it's not like the Matrix where it's like you put in a program, it's like, I know jujitsu or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
That'd be cool. I mean, to a degree, if we could do that. But yeah, so it's tough. Everybody thinks it's such an easy topic, communication, but and it's so nuanced to the people that you're working with. So just if you're, listening today, this is like an overview of all kinds of relationships. It's not, if you're here like, well, that's not how it works in my relationship, Lisa. Okay. I'm sure it works differently, but there's still like parts of it that are going to apply to all of us, as humans. So that's really all I got.
I was going to say, is there any other tips or tricks that you have for us today?
No, I just want to encourage everybody to control what you can, be responsible for yourself. Think about that stimulus and response, the space in between, because that's where your power is. How will you respond? And, not responding is a choice too. You don't have to respond. If you feel, like where this is going isn't going to be a helpful, or, that's a choice too, not responding. Also want to just throw out there that I think social media is not the best place to communicate with people. And I'm saying that because y'all are nodding your heads. You're like, oh. So I do truly believe that social media gives us this perception that everybody either loves each other or hates each other, But real world experience tells me, and I'm sure it does for you guys, we have to remember that we are here to, as humans, to connect. That's part of what makes us humans, connecting over social media or over a phone. Our brains are not developed for that. We are developed for, I'm looking at Andrews, like talking to Andrews, making eye contact with Baker, having a conversation, smiling, asking more questions. Social media, that's not the place for it. And it's turned into this really, I think, a place of you got to draw a line in the sand and you have to be on one side or the other. And that's not who we are as humans. So if you find yourself getting caught up in social media, I want to challenge you to detox from social media. You will go outside, be outside, go talk to your friends, go for a walk, read a book, connect with a human, you don't have to, social media is
very overwhelming.
It's overwhelming, and we're constantly bombarded with information about how we should think, how we should feel, how we should look. And then the more we go down the rabbit holes, the more it gives us more of what we're looking for because it's tracking what we're doing. So it's feeding us. And if you feel burnt out by social media, if it gives you a headache or you feel drained, then just, take it off. And there's some things out there that are great. You can come across some amazing things on social media. So if you're into like looking at cool stuff and, you just set a timer for yourself. And I encourage everybody to set a timer for social media and take it off your phone if you can.
Well, we really appreciate you coming in, and I'm excited that you were able to be the first person in the new studio, and hopefully you can come back and everybody can comment what they would like for you to come in and talk about. Hopefully we can get some more people from Service Member Family Care to come in and talk about some other topics as well. And hopefully this will be the new studio setup. We don't need to tweak it anymore, but
Nice. It's really nice.
We'll see how the editing goes with this.
Yeah.
But again, thank you for stopping by, and I'm sure we'll see you soon in the near future.
Yeah, no, I'm so honored I was the first one. That's just, thank you guys. Thanks for having me. And and if anybody needs support, they can call me. They can call 800-681-2558. My number is 803-409-9965. If you want to call me and tell me what you thought about this podcast, you can do that as well. Just don't text me. I don't text back. Context gets taken out, and I would prefer a phone call. That's
All right, again, thank you for stopping by. If you like this video, make sure you give it a big thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, make sure you hit the subscribe button, and we will catch you guys in the next episode.